Hello.
Hey, how's it going to you?
I'm well.
And
How are you?
I'm well as well. Thank you for being here. And good evening, everyone. And welcome to season 2, episode 4 of Ignite That Light. It's so great to have you with us this evening, Tia, and all of our audience. And we're going to talk about overcoming limiting beliefs and fears. We have an amazing guest. Like I said, Tia's here with us, and I'll introduce her shortly. But before I do, I want to remind folks to like, subscribe, do all the things, find us on your favorite podcast platform. Let us know how we're doing. You can find us, leave comments, review us, and also find me on X. You see where to find me here at Positively Chris. The goal of Ignite That Light, I say this every time, but for those who are new, it's to motivate, inspire, and connect with our fellow humans in this world where it can feel very isolated and disconnected. And these stories that we tell, these conversations that we have are meant to, again, humanize the people who we interact with on a daily basis on social media, on the various platforms that do exist. Again, these are people behind the screen, right? And not just avatars. And so that's the goal. My guest here, Tia, the wonderful, amazing, super talented Tia, aka So Shiny, aka at Tia Piano Girl on X. Welcome to Ignite That Light, and it's so good to have you join us this evening.
It's good to be here, Chris. Thank you for having me.
Of course, of course. Before we dive into the topic of overcoming limiting beliefs and fears, and again, we are super grateful to have you this evening. Can you give the audience some background about you so they can get to know you a little bit better?
Sure. So, I am, I teach piano. That's my thing right now. I have a piano channel on YouTube. It's Practical Piano with Tia. And I have a corresponding X, which is just at Practical Piano. And my goal with this is to eventually I want to launch a course. I want to teach people how to read music. I want to make music accessible to anyone who wants to learn it, specifically piano, because that's what I'm good at. So that's my current project. My background is I was homeschooled. I was raised by my mother, who's wonderful. I have a sister. But we grew up in covert domestic violence. And so there is a lot attached to that that I had to work through to get to where I'm at now and pursue this goal of reaching and helping lots of people.
Yeah, yeah, that's a beautiful thing, right? I think, and working through traumatic adversity and a lot of that, and finding something um, that you're looking to do that inspires again and motivates and really teaches, right? I mean, you're teaching folks, and that's a fantastic thing. And I'm grateful that you're here, and I appreciate the backstory, um, the vulnerability that it takes to kind of give some of that backstory as well. We appreciate that, and um,
Thank you.
as we kind of dive into this topic, yeah, I like to always get a definition in place, like whenever we talk about various things, so that we can kind of operate from the same sheet of music. Yeah, how do you like the pun? Um, but we want to make sure that you and I both are aligned on kind of what a limiting belief is. And I did a Google search, and I found
Okay.
something here on my notes, and how people define limiting beliefs. It can vary, but something I found was limiting beliefs are the stories we tell ourselves about who we are that hold us back from becoming who we are meant to be. I thought that was a pretty powerful thing when I read
Yeah.
that. It also mentions how sometimes they're often subconscious and how we don't even know that we have them until someone points them out to us, which I thought was a really brilliant point. And then another thing is it mentions here is when we don't, your human brain's kind of hardwired to conserve energy, and so we like the comfort zones. We tend to be averse to risk, and we only invest our energy in doing something when we believe it actually will accomplish something beneficial, right? And so it's hard for us to have that when we don't have that deep belief in ourselves. We can give up before we even really start, and so that's kind of, we do that self-sabotage thing, and that's kind of the limiting belief thing there. It kind of ties into that. And so curious about like what your thoughts are on how you would define limiting beliefs, and
Mhm.
does that cover it, or would you like to add something to it?
I think it's pretty concise. There is a difference for me between the definition you just read out and how I would define it for myself.
And that's fine.
So, pardon my silence. I'm thinking.
No, that's
Okay.
good. Appreciate it.
So for me, a limiting belief is something that you believe is true about yourself, and that sticks to the definition. It's a story that you believe is true about yourself. And the reason it's limiting is because it's a lie. It's not actually true. It's not a reflection on who you were actually created to be. And because so the part that wasn't quite fitting was, could you read the last couple sentences or
Sure,
what
sure.
repeat
Yeah,
what you
yeah.
said?
It says we tend to our human brain's wired to conserve energy, and we tend to be
Yes.
averse to risk. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So I experienced that because the other thing about our brains is that they're wired for survival. And so you do whatever it takes to help you survive. So the self-sabotage bit is where I take the exception, because for me, I was always trying to move into the direction that I wanted to go. But this preset belief made it really hard to move up against it. It was like, I think, is it Apollo who pushes the stone up the hill? It felt like that. It felt like moving through sludge up to my neck. I just actually couldn't take action as hard as I tried. The emotional friction that came with that was too great. So I think that you can't act against a limiting belief because you believe it. But there are two ways you can get rid of the belief. You can expose it, because anything exposed to light, any lie that is exposed to light, cannot grow, and in fact often dissipates. And the other thing that you can do is replace it with real beliefs. So that's, yeah.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, it reminds me of that quote that sunlight is the best disinfectant, right? Like when you actually, put some spotlight on there and really highlight, like, wait a minute, like, is this true? Is it not? Right. And kind of really give it some light. I think that's I think that's powerful what you just said, Tia. So I appreciate that. That's a great clarification.
Thank you.
Yeah. And I think, it's good to also, as we, and, have that definition kind of highlighted there. I'm curious to know what you think. We'll dive into some examples momentarily, but how do you feel about limiting beliefs and their impact on our personal growth, right? Like, what's that kind of next component, right? How do they impact our personal growth as
Sorry.
humans?
Are you asking how I feel, or you want to know what I think?
That's a great clarification question.
Okay.
No, that's good. I mean, I think it comes down to what do you believe, right? What are your thoughts on how they impact our personal growth? How these limiting beliefs can impact our personal growth?
Well, I think that our limiting beliefs come from our individual, unique circumstances and personalities. And so I can't speak to how they're going to impact everyone, but I can share a story about how one of my limiting beliefs impacted me. So, one thing that probably the biggest one that I've become aware of in the last few years was I believed that I could not generate good ideas. And if I happened to generate a good idea, I was incapable of executing it, especially individually. And that was the belief it stunted me throughout my teenage years as I tried to start a business. I tried to move in the direction of writing a book or starting my channel. And every time that I would start in that direction, it was like I was grasping for something I couldn't reach. And I found out a couple of years ago, I had this memory that came up every now and then. And until I articulated it with somebody that I trusted, I wasn't able to incorporate it and like tear it apart. So when I was about 7 or 8 years old, my sister had this stick that is just like a sword, and she loved it. It was her favorite thing. So I had this idea the one day. My dad had a machine shop, and I took it to him and I was like, can you make this, shape it more like a sword? Like, can you make the blade little like this and then flat on the bottom? And he argued with me and told me why it was a bad idea and that it was going to get fragile and break. And I was like, well, I really want to give her the stick back and it looked like a sword. So can you do it? And he did it. And then when he handed it back to me, he said, he basically explicitly told me that I didn't have good ideas and I would never be able to do anything about them without him. But is essentially what that told me is I would never be able to do anything on my own. And that's actually a lot harder to say to you than it was to say to myself and to say to my
Appreciate
confidence.
you sharing that, Tia. Thank you. Yeah.
Let me get my thoughts back together here. So he said it in such a way that it stuck with me until a couple of years ago. And it like ingrained in my psyche, essentially. And this is because I have an entrepreneurial spirit, this was the most crippling thing he could have said to me, because entrepreneurs thrive on generating innovative ideas and then bringing them to life. Now, the way I overcame it, part of it was being able to articulate it to someone once we were safe. That was awesome. It was the first time I was able to express what I had experienced and the emotion attached to it and how difficult it had been to move in spite of that belief. The other way I handled it, though, this particular limiting belief, was I had listened to a lot of Jordan Peterson from when I found him in 2016. And I was listening to him for like 4 to 6 hours a day, nonstop, every day for like 4 years. And one of the things that helped me was when he talked about incremental improvement, where you have a big goal, but you can't reach it because you're trying to reach the big goal. When what you need to do is break it down into what's the smallest thing I can do to work towards that today. And so even while I was living in the same environment, I was trying to take small steps towards that goal. Can I say, I think limiting beliefs are different than fears?
I like that. Yeah, you can definitely make that differentiation.
Okay. Can I explain my definition of a fear?
Absolutely. Yeah. Let's do it. Let's dive into it. I appreciate you sharing what you've already shared, Tia. I think this is powerful and it's important to kind of get that out there and to let people know the backstory and your experience with it. But yeah, feel free to define a fear and how that differentiates between or differs from a limiting belief.
Wonderful. Thank you. So fear is more rooted in survival than actually the beliefs. So the beliefs are what you believe about yourself, often because of your circumstances or the people surrounding you. But fear is rooted in your fight, flight, freeze, fawn response in the back of your brain. That's actually just existing to keep you safe. So one of the main fears, I think fears, therefore, they're grounded in either loss or wounds, or the potential of receiving losses or wounds. And a fear that I experienced was because of the environment I was raised in, we had to keep a specific person safe, or no, happy, in order for everyone else to be safe. Because if we didn't, he would take it out on my mother. And if he didn't take it out on my mother, he would take it out on my sister. I was the last person I was basically neglected. And that's why the few times he spoke to me, were very impactful. But God blessed me with a phlegmatic personality, and with that comes discretion and wisdom. So because I was able to put up defenses basically around myself, I was the last person that he would get to. Anyways, so being in that environment taught me to be two different people. I could be myself around my mother, and I could have been myself around my sister, but there were other dynamics that messed that up a little. We're on good terms now, though. But I could be real and myself around my mother, and I could have my faith around her because we shared our faith. But I had to be a different person around him. That works. That survival mechanism works when you're in ongoing danger. But it doesn't work all the time. So what I learned to do was sacrifice who I was, what I believed in, and what I preferred in order to keep the peace, which is not really keeping peace. Peace is when you collaborate with someone else. It was trying to keep safe. And early into my teens, the first time that I didn't keep the peace to be safe was I had recently learned about gossip and how my God doesn't like gossip. It's really important to him that we don't say mean things behind other people's backs. And every time that I would go out with this man, and he would talk negatively about my mom or my sister. So I prepared for that after I learned this, and I stopped responding to the negativity. And eventually he asked, like, how come you're not talking? And I said, I don't want to talk bad about my mom and sister. And from there, he didn't take me out anymore. So that's okay, because I would rather, this was the first part of moving beyond the fear. I was afraid of losing connection. So it was the first step toward, you know what? He doesn't pay attention to me anymore, but that's because I won't betray my beliefs, and I won't betray the people who I love. And so if that's what it costs, that's what it costs. But I had to work this through multiple times. The worst way that this fear manifested itself was in my young adulthood, when I was actually trying to make social connections, because I started doing the same thing to fit in. So I didn't express what I believed, or I agreed with things that I didn't believe in order to fit in. And so now I was three different people. I'm the person who makes them happy, I'm the person who makes him happy, and I'm the person who makes my mama happy. And so I wasn't really a person, because my existence was based on other people. And so it was through listening to people like Peterson and Jocko. The thing that he tried to take away from me was the ability to be capable for myself. And that's not what a father is supposed to do. He is supposed to make you capable. And so worse than like not making me capable, he tried to sink me under. And listening to these healthy men, for any girl that's having trouble because she doesn't have a father figure, or her father figure is sabotaging her like that, surround yourself. We have a great opportunity now with media you can surround yourself with people who are safe and who do build into you. And what these men were able to give to me was the foundation where I knew that if I met them face to face, they believed I was a capable person. They didn't think that I was floundering along or I wasn't doing my best. They would think that I was doing my best and it was worthwhile to continue to do that. So I was able to establish a kind of father base in myself by reaching out for these different sources. I think I got off track. I was talking about fear.
It's okay. It's okay. No, this was good. This is good. This is really, really powerful stuff, Tia, like what you're talking about. And I'll you know, you can continue to you know, gather your thoughts if you'd like. But I think to kind of, you know, follow up on what you said, there's something really, really meaningful and powerful what you said about this idea of fear and kind of what it can do, right? And there's this book that came out in the late 90s called The Gift of Fear, and it came out, I don't know if you heard of it, but this author's name is Gavin de Becker, and he's, I think, consulted with various agencies across North America to kind of help their leaders understand how to work through fear, right? And the idea of you know, it being protective, right? That's a protector, like that's that protective instinct, the role that fear really plays, right? And it can be a powerful tool for survival, right? As you said, but also there's this there's this idea of trusting your gut in a situation, right? And going with that, and we have these subtle kind of signals that exist, and when you can actually understand them and actually get yourself attuned to them and recognize them, it's actually, fear is not a negative thing. It's just something that exists as a sign, as a tool, as a mechanism evolutionarily, I think, right? I think it comes from, I think, just like, again, like you think about like back in like the days where you hear something in the bushes and you have to either decide, okay, am I gonna like run toward it or run away? We decide what your options are there. But it's an interesting book because it talks about how, again, it's not necessarily something that needs to have like a negative stigma attached to it, because you know, fear actually is powerful and something that we can use to actually, once we actually learn more about how to deal with threatening situations, you know, it's just really interesting and a fascinating read if you haven't read it yet.
I haven't. I've heard of it. I
Yeah.
have to put it on my list.
I want to say that Jocko and Jordan Peterson have actually even either mentioned the author in the past or have maybe even interviewed him. But his name's Gavin de Becker, and worth searching for The Gift of Fear as a book, because again, it's worth challenging some of the narratives that exist about that keep us from that hold us back from really reaching our true potential. Because I think sometimes that fear is sort of it can be helpful or it can be a liar, is what I would say. And so we have to decide kind of where that fear is kind of coming from. So again, worth looking into the book. And I appreciate you again sharing what you've shared, because it's the personal attachment to kind of these stories, right? And kind of that's what really, I think, this is all about. Like this conversation that we're having, I don't want you to make stuff up, right? It has to kind of mean something. And by you giving us and sharing with us these stories and what they mean to you, my personal hope is that people see that you are not just the piano person, right? You have so much more to offer, and you have so much more of a story to share. And I will say one thing, as you were telling us some of this already, like it's clear based on the way that you are explaining yourself that you are a teacher. Like there's this, the way that you explain things, and like your just your cadence, the way you speak, like I very much feel like as you could be a teacher of not just piano, but of like other subjects too. So no, it's helpful just to hear your perspective. And again, I do want to let you continue the story about fear, and again how it ties to, you had to keep someone happy in order to keep yourself safe, And kind of that link, I think that when you made that link, a light bulb went off in my head. It's like, wait a minute, like I think I've done that in my life too, because I come from a very, I wouldn't say the exact same background, but I've had my childhood was not exactly the most peaceful, I will say. And I don't think most people know that about me, but like I come from a pretty rough background, childhood situation. My parents divorced when I was 5. There's so much more that kind of came from that, and the story that kind of comes from that is that, you know, it didn't exactly improve once the divorce happened. Things ended up, you know, getting worse. And it's like, how is that possible? Like, it should have gotten better.
Right?
But it actually ended up getting worse. And so and throughout my youth, there was this there were limiting beliefs that existed based on the parental interactions that I had witnessed and observed, and my understandings of and you know, I also had a younger brother, and like he was kind of this, I'll just say that he was the more charismatic of us. So here I was, the nerdy glasses wearing, you know, since he was 5 years old, boy going through school, no charisma at all. And my interactions kind of going through like social, you know, just engagement with folks. Like I found myself in the library most days playing Magic the Gathering with a friend or two.
It's hard to be social when you're a nerd.
Yeah. That was basically my life from like the age of 5 till about 18. So
high five with that.
I don't know how I survived it. Some people like that, don't get me wrong. Some people enjoy that sort of thing, but like I kind of sometimes wish that my upbringing was slightly different. So you know, I think, but again, that just kind of shows to you that that again, our experiences, yeah, we may have some different experiences throughout our lives, but we also do, I think, share some components, right? Some things that actually probably are pretty similar. And again, that I would like to also kind of highlight that part of this, the point of this podcast is to kind of remind people that we have a lot more in common than we do have, I think, as differences amongst ourselves. And when you described what you were saying, it's like, wait a minute, like I was doing that to keep my dad happy. Like when I was, you know, 3, 4, 5 years old, like that was the thing. Like what you described was like, wait a minute, like, did I do this whole thing? Like the story you were telling was sort of something that I can imagine myself doing for my brother, my younger brother. The idea of the sword and the stick. And it's like, wait a minute, like that's my story.
You do for your little brother.
Yeah. It's like, wait a minute, like sister. I did that. But really you did it, but it's something that like I envision myself having done as well. So again, really, really powerful stuff. And I appreciate you taking a moment to kind of dive into that, because again, it sounds like it wasn't easy to even verbalize it. So again, super appreciative of this conversation so far.
Thank you.
Yeah. And go ahead.
I think a lot of your listeners are going to find that maybe you didn't have abusive, but I think a lot of people have trauma growing up at varying levels. And I think a lot of people are going to resonate with kids are in a position of powerlessness. And when you're in a position of powerlessness, you have to use the tools at your disposal. And it's very dangerous to upset whoever is in power. So I think a lot of people are going to struggle with that to some level or another, of realizing, oh, I've got these patterns set in me from childhood that were necessary for childhood, but they don't work so good now. Yeah, I remembered where I was going with
Go for it. Yeah, continue.
So it was the carrying over from childhood into adulthood. So I found myself carrying over into my social interactions the same, being a different person, being whoever it was necessary to be to make other people happy. And what ended up happening is it worked great as long as I was willing to keep up that charade. But as I was individuating and becoming more myself, I started telling the truth. And I stopped agreeing with things that I didn't agree with. And eventually this led to me being, it was funny because a couple of people ganged up on me, and they had I'm a diagnosed sociopath in their bio, and I didn't believe it. And I don't know why I didn't believe it. I think I thought that they were just like edgy. They just thought they was something.
Yeah, something
But
cool.
their
Yeah.
actions ended up like proving that out, because I was roundly bullied and slandered behind my back and all that, to the point where at one point I was considering suicide. I hope that I can say that on your podcast. And I was having trouble sleeping. I was super anxious. I had a few panic attacks. And one day I was praying and God told me to choose. And I knew he meant choose between following him, believing in him, and actually not just holding those beliefs, but being willing to stand on them, regardless of what came up against him. Or I could be the person that makes these people happy and that makes my dad happy. And I considered it, and I thought, I looked over my life and I went, well, who's had my back? Not him and not these people. They only like me when I be who they want me to be. God's always had my back because he took care of us in the worst times. And my mama always had my back. She was always supportive, like even when she didn't agree with me. And I thought, okay, well, if I lose like 20 people over here, but I get to keep God and my mother, I'm cool with that. So I made that choice and I cut ties with these people and I started sleeping a tiny bit better. By now I could sleep just fine.
Great.
But a few months later, this was amazing. I had no idea that this was going to happen. A few months later, he moved my mother to a city that she had never been in before. And I told you I was homeschooled. She was a homemaker for 34 years while they were married. And he insisted that she not go and get a job. And then he barely provided for us while I was growing up, even though he was making a considerable amount. We have no idea where that all went. So he moved my mother to a new city, and he left her after a week, after having a conversation with her that I don't know if suicide seeding is a thing, but I think it is. I think he seeded it into the conversation. As she related it to me, that's what we figured out. So left her on the 19th floor of this building. And me and my sister were living together in a different city. So we were calling her every day. She was calling us every day and made it through, thank God. But I got off topic again. Oh, okay. When he left, like in the first week, he didn't reach out to me. I reached out to him and I said, hey, we need to have a phone call. Can we schedule one? So we scheduled one. And during the call, I asked, because men who divorce their wives quite often are cheating. I asked if he was cheating. And he said no, something about his integrity. And then he said, but if I want to have a relationship in the future, I will. That's my choice. Now, this guy was claiming to be a Christian for 10 years. And I know my beliefs. And I know if a man divorces his wife, he's not supposed to get married, according to our religion. And, it's not for everybody. Not everybody follows these rules, but it's what we're supposed to follow. And if you're not following them, well, then it's a pretty good tip off. And I said, well, we're also told not to associate with people who are promiscuous and constantly angry and stuff. So I said, well, if you cheat on her, I can't be around that. And he hung up on me and he never reached out again, which is, it sounds terrible. It sounds like I should be like so sad, that my dad doesn't want to talk to me anymore. But it's the best feeling in the world to be able to relate that story.
Yeah.
But
Well,
what it was is I wasn't afraid of losing that connection. And because I valued what I believed and who was important to me more than I valued the other person. So I got to practice that, and it's awesome. It's awesome. So I think if you have some listeners and they're afraid of losing the people around them,
yeah.
and that's why they're acting like not themselves. First of all, the people around you don't love you for who you are. They love you for who you're pretending to be. So if you figure out who you are and you stop pretending, they're not going to like you anymore. And that's going to be very painful. And if you're trying to hold two identities in your head, it's going to destroy you for a while. Now, you can recover, but eventually you have to make a choice. You have to make the choice between who you are and who this caricature is that someone else wants you to be. And you have to be willing to stand on that, regardless of what comes against it. Now, the most valuable thing about this is when you understand yourself and you accept yourself and you're willing to guard and protect that person, it will be worth it to lose everything to maintain who you are.
I mean, that's worth repeating, Tia. Like what you just said, it'll be worth it to lose that in order to keep true to who you really are. Like that's really powerful and worth repeating, because the descriptions, I think a lot of people are dealing with that, right? And or they have in the past, the idea that they're not really being true to themselves, and maybe they haven't been true to themselves for a while. And it sounds like you have, like you're much happier. You feel freed, right? Like and you seem
Yes.
much happier, given that you don't
I've
have
never
this.
been this happy in my
Yeah,
life, Chris.
it's obvious. I mean,
Ever.
it's clear based on the smile, like that. It's actually kind of blinding me. It's
Thank you.
you're happy with who you are now, and
I'm so shiny.
yeah, that's why it's called. That's why you're called so shiny. There you go.
I am
But
happy with who I am.
that's fantastic, and I think that's something that I think may be missing to some of the listeners of this podcast. And so, hopefully, what you just shared resonates and allows people to see, like, wait a minute, like there's somebody else who's going through this. Tia's gone through this. This is how she is now. This is how she feels now. This is it's probably not, thinking back on like experiences that I've had. I had to play this kind of role of the nerd because I looked the part throughout my youth, and I ended up getting, I think I told people this before, some people know this, nominated for most likely to succeed in ninth grade for the superlatives for a yearbook. And they made us, it is, but like they made us like wear like a heavy like backpack on one shoulder, or they took the picture like it was me and somebody else, and like we had to like stand with our backs to each other, and like with big heavy backpacks, and we had to have like, I think, pocket protectors in, like it was like, especially we had to like put on the logo, but like we had to look a little bit more the part. And it's like, wait a minute, like, is this really who I am? Sure, like I'm the one who raises his hand in class because I want to get through the question so it can be done sooner. Like that's why I'm raising my hands. I'll answer the questions, but like I end up, I guess, rebelling against some of it, getting out of high school. I wouldn't say I got into trouble necessarily, but I would say that I was probably I wasn't being as safe as I could have been with my life, and just I felt a little invincible at the time, which I think most people in their teenage years have an invincibility belief at some point.
Teenagers live forever.
There you go. And so I felt that way for a while there, but eventually had to kind of learn to grow, right? I was still living with my parents at the time, and eventually had to step out. I had a bit of a falling out with my stepdad at the time. I showed up a little bit late coming home from, I was out with friends, and I arrived home at 9:02 instead of 9 o'clock
Whoa.
p.m. And that was, the deadline was, remember, keep in mind, I was 18 or 19 at the time, but I had to be home by 9 o'clock or else. And I got home at 9:02. I had my own car, everything. And
Were you like gassing it on the way home?
Yes, you can imagine how quick I was driving.
I'll pay for the ticket as long as I
I'll
don't
pay
get
for the ticket. Yeah,
bad
exactly.
driving.
I mean, let me tell you, the freeways in LA at 9 o'clock at night, I mean, it depends on the day of the week, but sometimes they're hard to get through. Thankfully, this was I think like a Tuesday night or something, so I was fine. But I showed up in 2 minutes after the curfew, and got an earful, and I said, you know what, like my stepdad ended up saying something along the lines of, you should move out if you're not going to stick to the schedule. And again, I'm invincible Chris, like it's 19, I'm fine, like I'll be fine. But yeah, fine, exactly, that's what happened. You got it. To you, the next day I load my car with all my stuff for my bedroom, and
did you have somewhere to go?
I found a motel that was doing weekly, and I had my own job. I was, I might have been still flipping burgers at McDonald's at the time, but, but I had some money, and I found my way to a motel, and they did bi-weekly or per week. It was not the safest part of town at all, but I had to feel this sense. I had to get out of this sense of fear all the time, right? Like I was still fearing in my early adulthood of members of my family, and it's like, wait a minute, like, should I still fear them? Like, when does that break happen? Like, when do I finally get to step out of that? And that outburst, I would say, gave me the opportunity to say, let me actually follow through on this and see where it goes. And it took a tremendous amount of, I think, courage. I think looking back on it now, I mean, maybe some people probably don't think it does, but at the time, having been told you're not gonna, my parents didn't really support the whole me going and stepping out on my own. I think they kind of liked having me around, but this was sort of that kind of outburst where it was like, let me do something for myself for once. Right. And it really was I think a big stepping stone for me in terms of getting myself out of that fearful lifestyle that I was living, even living with parents at the once I'm an adult, even stepped out of that shadow and felt so much better for it. I did end up, I never really ended up moving back. Like, that's the thing. Like, I could have said, you know what, I'm just kidding, sorry guys, I didn't mean it. But that was a very meaningful point in my life in terms of me finally getting out, because I never moved back. I found an apartment shortly thereafter that was looking for tenants, and the rest is history. But I've definitely, when you describe the idea of living in fear of a parent, especially, I feel like it even continued, not just in my early years, but also even in my late teens and getting into my adulthood, which was as I reflect back on it, it's like, how did I even get that far? How did I get that far? And right? and why wasn't I more assertive and getting out of that sooner? But really, really appreciate you sharing what you've shared, to you, because it's not easy to, right? I think at the end of the day, it's not easy to share these stories. And it's really, that vulnerability. And I really sincerely appreciate you sharing what you've shared so far.
Can I say, Chris, I know we're getting close to our time.
Yeah, that's fine. Go for it. Yeah.
Your story reminds me of, have you heard of Alex Hormozi?
Name sounds familiar. Yeah.
He's this cool guy, built a bunch of businesses, and now
that's
he makes a ton of money and he does YouTube videos. But he described the same. He was afraid of his dad, and he actually moved out without even telling his dad. He moved across the country. And then he called him a week later and was like, "Hey, I moved."
Yeah.
Your story reminded me of that.
Hormozi, I think his name came up as an influencer. Yeah.
there's two different kinds of fears, and there's a healthy fear of your parents where you respect them. Like, I'm still afraid of my mom. We're best friends and we're on good terms, but if she's gonna pull the mom card, I'm gonna be terrified.
Mm-hmm.
Right? There's a healthy fear that you can have of your parents, and the thing is, I know she loves me, and I know she wants the best for me, and I know that she is willing to stand her ground for who she is now as well. She didn't used to be, and that's how we got in the mess we were in. But now she will stand her ground, and that's awesome. So I think there's a healthy fear you can have of your parents, and then I think there's unhealthy fear. And I think the unhealthy fear is when you know they don't really have your best interest and they're out. People are people are either, do you know zero sum game? Do you know that phrase?
Oh yeah,
Where you
absolutely. Yeah.
play a game so that there's one winner and everybody else loses.
Loses. Yeah.
And many people play their life like it's a zero sum game. And they cause the most damage to people. So it's important when we're evaluating who's around us, who are the collaborators going to take from anyone else. It's going to make everybody else's life better as well. And the more successful they get, the better it is for me, because the more successful everyone gets, the bigger it gets. But the zero sum mindset people, they think the more successful someone gets, the smaller it gets. So I better get everything. And so the person who demolished my identity was playing zero sum game, because it was he wins at everybody else's expense. But the people who build into you, they don't believe in the zero sum game. They believe in collaborating. And when we are each individually successful, it makes everybody else more successful. So I think there's two different kinds of fears, and they come from two different kinds of parents.
I love that. I love that. That explanation of the differences to you. Yeah, I think that's worth reflecting on, right, for folks. I think it's some people don't differentiate between their fear or the type of fear that exists, and the zero sum mindset. Really, yeah. I mean, I've posted about this in the past on X. Actually, the idea that life isn't a zero sum game, and when we think about things like other topics like negotiations, right? And we think about, well, and there's this book called Never Split the Difference. I don't know if you've heard of this, Tia, but the idea that like it's an interesting negotiation book. It's actually by I think a former FBI hostage negotiator. Really interesting and insightful conversation. But the book is about how it's kind of, I would say, controversial, but the point being that like that you can look at things and say, should you think of this, like, for instance, like say we're trying to I don't know, just think about like, we're trying to make like a pizza or something, right? And like, and so we have to buy all the ingredients of the pizza, right? The dough or the flour, all the other stuff, the different ingredients we're gonna add to the mozzarella cheese. And we were making this pizza, and like we make it, we kind of make this amazing, we roll out the dough, we make the pizza, throw it in the oven, and then once it's cooked, you take a couple slices, and I think to myself, oh my God, like now I need to get a couple slices too, or else she's going to get all of it. And it's like, wait a minute, like we still have the ingredients. We just make more. Like the mindsets are, it's like this idea of like a scarcity mindset versus kind of like this growth mindset. The world, it can be one where it can be a world of abundance, right? It doesn't have to be a world of scarcity. And it depends on how you're kind of viewing the world and that lens that you use to view the world. So yeah, I mean, what you're saying totally resonates. Not everything it necessarily needs to be zero sum. If you're thinking about conversations, negotiations with folks, you can say, look, like you're trying to get something that you want, and I'm trying to get something that I want. We can both find somewhere where we're both getting what we want. We just have to work on this together. And so, go ahead.
Yes. But
Yes, but good. Yes.
yes, but you can only collaborate with other collaborative people. If you have a zero-sum person that you're trying to negotiate with, guess what? They're going to negotiate you down to zero.
Yeah.
Because they want it all. So you got to be careful who you take the collaborative mindset to, because it works when you deal with healthy people, and even healthy people who are messed up. They might explode, but then they'll come around. It never works with zero-sum people. They do not want to collaborate. And so that's why when you're putting up boundaries with toxic people, I just had to go, I'm not talking bad about my mom and sister anymore. Not like, well, I'll talk about them like sometimes if you'll agree not to sometimes. It's like, no. There's times to collaborate and there's times to shut it down. And so I completely agree with you. But people can get stuck trying to collaborate with predatory individuals, and
Absolutely.
you don't collaborate with the shark.
That's well said. I mean, I wish that needs to be on a T-shirt or something to you. I think that the idea don't collaborate with the shark.
Thank you. I should start a business as well, because I don't have enough to do.
There you go. The T-shirt business on the side. Yeah, since you have nothing else going on in your life, right, Tia? There you go. But I do want to say something about like just that mindset idea, and as we kind of get closer to wrapping this conversation up, the zero sum versus growth mindset. If you don't mind, just for a few minutes. And the idea, like I have some notes here.
Tons of time.
There you go. Great. I love this topic, especially as we kind of like, as we kind of segue towards wrapping this up. But the idea that like the zero sum to growth kind of mindset. You said obviously you don't want to negotiate with people who aren't willing to, right, or to have that zero sum mindset. But it's for those people who want to cultivate a growth mindset. I found some kind of notes around what people can do, but I'm curious to know your thoughts as well. The idea of thinking about failures as a learning opportunity. That's kind of a perspective shift that I think a lot of people don't really incorporate. But it's like one of my favorite mentors in my professional career once told me, you either win or you learn. And so and it really took me a minute to really grasp the meaning of that phrase. But if you're taking failure and loss and learning something from that, it's not really a loss. And it took me a minute to kind of really grasp that idea, like the idea that like I'm not good at this, and taking that phrase and saying, wait a minute, like I can improve, right? It's like and again, you as a teacher with piano, like you can say something like, or somebody can come to you and say, I'm not good at piano, like I'm awful at it, like, but that's not, I think, gonna benefit them long term to say that, right? Like, how about let me work on For Elise, which again, I'm trying to play that song. I love Beethoven. I can only get the first couple of chords out of that.
Wait, you play piano?
Well, I'm trying to, yes.
You're trying to. Oh, that's fantastic! Good for you. I'm so happy.
That's part of the reason why I love the content you're putting out there, is that like I'm trying to learn it and teach myself, but I already have a teacher here. And you talk about the beauty of social media and of media that exists. It's like, if you want to learn these things, you can find so many resources out there if you take the time to focus on it. And so I'm trying to learn songs. I look at, there's like and this, Tia, there are different types of videos out there on YouTube that are like, it's almost like Rock Band, where like the streaks, like they kind of go down the screen, and it's like, press this one, then press this one, then press this one, and you kind of go in this order. It's very much like Rock Band, but for piano. Yeah. And if you slow down the video to like 25% speed, I can catch up. I can keep that up. I can do that. Like I can do these songs.
I can do it.
Yeah. Yes. But I feel with practice, with effort, I find those things to be very soothing and sort of what's the word? They're rewarding, right? To say like, I can play this song on the piano, and as of like a week ago, I couldn't do any of that. Like that sort of helped me kind of with my growth mindset, right? It's like, I can do it if I give it the time and the effort and the attention it deserves. I think the word can't is one of the worst words in the English language, I think, because
you can't do it now, but you will be able to do it in the future.
Yeah.
And it's all the incremental improvement again. Like you can't do all of it now. If you try, even with your Rock Band thing, if you try and do like the entire song in one go, that's going to be really rough. the best thing to do with that is like take a small portion and do that over and over again until you feel good about it. You've got it. Because your brain can only focus on so much information at one time. So give it a little bit, get really good at that, and you'll nail it. And then, oh, I'm so excited.
Okay.
I'm so excited. You were talking about learning from mistakes.
Yeah.
Mistakes are your friend. I did a video about this recently. It's up on my channel. But there's the fear of mistakes is something that a lot of people deal with. I see this in my students all the time. And it comes from like at some point you've made a mistake, like an honest mistake, and somebody's punished you as if it was on purpose. So now you're afraid of making mistakes. Sometimes that's where it comes from. I don't know where else it would come from. It could come from somewhere else, but that's where I've identified it came from in me. But mistakes show us where we're lacking, so that not so that we can just go, oh, well, because I'm lacking in this area, I'm a terrible person at that. It's so that you can go, okay, I'm lacking in this area. This is the place that I need to focus on. And then you can hone your focus, you can divert all your energy to it, and you'll succeed in that area. So it'll make you better. Mistakes can make you better, or you can let them define you, and they'll keep you stagnant. And stagnant is not stagnant. Stagnant is falling apart because of entropy. It's how our world works.
That's exactly right. That's beautifully said, Tia. Yeah, I mean that's exactly it. It's like becoming stagnant is basically admitting and accepting defeat, and it comes to something like that. So I'm
right.
Yeah, I think what you're saying is spot on. I appreciate you sharing all of that, and I'm glad that this excites you too, because again, like I'm trying to learn piano, and so that's again part of I think part of the reason why I resonate so much with what you put out there online. It's that not just the So Shiny content, which is amazing, by the way. A lot of X joke of the day and X, whatever, like ad of the day, you name it.
That goes for whoever posts them. I just curate them.
You curate, yeah, but that's why your content is so fun. Make sure you are following at Tia Piano Girl on X, and all of her social media links are out there. If you find her, make sure you follow all of her accounts. As we get closer to kind of wrapping this up, Tia, I want to kind of give you a chance to offer some final words of encouragement for listeners who really want to commit to overcoming those limiting beliefs and fears. Kind of like, what are some words of encouragement that you want to offer folks?
You are far more capable than you think you are. And if you start stepping toward your potential, it's like compound interest. You take little steps, and eventually you find yourself at the top of the mountain. So that one day you look up and you go, I didn't know that I could be who I am today. I had no idea. It might not help because I'm a total stranger, but I believe you're more capable than you think you are. And I know how hard it is some days to get up and make a coffee and take a shower. Do it. I know it's hard, but you're worth it. And thank you, Chris, for having me. I really liked being here. It was fun.
Thank you, Tia. Thank you so much for sharing and for those final words. I think those are fantastic. I mean, I believe in my listeners and everyone who's watching this. Again, you actively decided to take a chance and take a listen or watch this episode of Ignite That Light. And I'm grateful for everyone who's taken that chance and given us the opportunity. And Tia, super grateful to have you here. This was a deep discussion, and I think deeper than most. I hope that most people, when they listen to this, they watch it, they hear this, they say, you know what, again, this is something that maybe they didn't expect, but I think that they're going to hopefully find that there is a tremendous value from this conversation with that you've approached with vulnerability, with trust, with empathy, with compassion. You've brought all of that to this conversation, Tia. So I want to say thank you for all of this, and we hope to have you again sometime in the future on another episode of Ignite That Light. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you, Chris.
Have a good one.